This is a video of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and I know it's a little bit outdated. However, you have to hear what she has to say in response to the rise of anti-Semitism, Islam, and so many other really important questions.
But what are your thoughts about what just happened in Amsterdam after the game?
Thank you. Yes. So reflections, Ayaan, on last week's horrors in Amsterdam.
Amsterdam is in doom loop, just like I think the UK probably is also in its own form of doom loop. And here's the loop. You have a number of immigrant Muslim mainly young men. So it's not all Muslims, but a cluster of them. They are completely radicalized either as Islamists or by gangs. Um, they are shut out, or in my view, they've shut themselves out of the wider society. There's an infrastructure in the Netherlands. It's been permitted and it's been going on for the last 25 years at least that I'm aware of mosques and Islamic centers and now online, where these young men, their idea of what it is to live in society is completely warped by the Muslim Brotherhood. That erupts into violence. So what happened in Amsterdam is specifically against Jews. It's a pogrom. It's exactly what they hear in the mosque and in the Islamic center, that Jews are cursed because they bring corruption and so on to the land, that it says in the Quran and in the Hadith, wherever you find them, kill them. Then they get all the propaganda from the Middle East. Just to give you an idea, the Muslims that I talk about in Holland are not from Palestine. They're not from the Middle East. They're from North Africa. They're either from Morocco or from Turkey. And they are not first generation. They are second or third generation. So they have no proximity whatsoever with the conflict that's going on in Gaza. But it's what they hear in the mosque. They act on it. The academics, the political leaders, the mayor of Amsterdam, they all sit together and they shake their heads. They say, what a shame. That was a pogrom. How awful. We apologize to the victims. We feel deeply ashamed about how we've let down the Jews one more time. Nothing is going to happen. Why is nothing going to happen? Because of the demographics. I haven't seen any serious attempt by the Dutch to dismantle this infrastructure that Hamasifies the hearts and minds of these young people. I haven't seen it at all. I've seen Geert Wilders, who's elected to be prime minister, but who's not prime minister because they won't let him, suggest things that might bring about consequences, but it's not going to happen. And I've seen the exact same thing in the UK, in France, in Germany, a condemnation of the terrorist attack or the riots or what have you. But the infrastructure of Hamasification continues to grow day by day. And demographically speaking, these constituencies that go to these infrastructures, they will grow through immigration, through their birth rates, and through these parallel societies. And that's what I mean by the doom loop. It's going to keep expanding. That's really the real challenge for Europe.
Thank you for your comments, Ayaan. I've followed your career through reading your books and listening to your appearances on current affairs programs and videos and the like over the years. And since I'm unexpectedly in the same room with you, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for your incredibly brave witness towards much that's best in the West, and also speaking out so clearly about the dangers of Islam. I think you represent two qualities that are desperately needed, namely courage and rationality. My question is about the use of the term Islamism, which seems to me to be gaining a kind of widespread acceptance. I hear it more and more. And personally, I'm deeply suspicious of it. I think it's a little addition to the word Islam to kind of soften the blow, to put a distance linguistically between the fact that the problem we're talking about a lot of the time is actually Islam. It's not some bit of Islam. And that the Islamists, in their thinking and in their working out of the texts of Islam, are the consistent ones. They are the Muslims. And what the Quran would call the hypocrites are the moderate Muslims, the ones who don't take it literally, don't take it seriously, don't go the whole way. So it's when I listen to you, I always say, but she's using the term Islamism. And Majid Nawaz and several other very sensible commentators use it. And I'd just like to hear you say why you think it's a valid term.
Well, so from an academic perspective, when you say what exactly is Islamism, you are going to conclude it's the most serious form of Islam, meaning it is Islam derived from the Quran, the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and the Sirah, which is the example of the Prophet, and the application of Sharia law. That's what we've been calling Islamism. So Islamism is Islam at its most pure form, in its most pure form. And you're absolutely right. Most Muslims who do not abide by Islam in its most pure form are regarded, for instance, by the Muslim Brotherhood, by Hizb ut-Tahrir, by those who abide by Islam, and they're regarded as lost, as wrong, as hypocrites, as traitors, as heretics, and even real takfir, which is as unbelievers, and some of them are, in fact, many of them are killed. And the statement, more Muslims have been killed by the extremists than non-Muslims, is true because of that. And more Muslims are oppressed by those who want to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad in Medina. Why do I use Islamism? Because when I first started in, 2001, 9/11, 2001, I was debating and speaking in a climate where I was constantly told there's a small minority of Muslims, the people from Morocco and Turkey and other Muslim majority countries in the Netherlands, they feel alienated. And we as a majority, we have to, on the one hand, make them feel welcome and at home, while on the other hand, criticizing the basic tenets of their faith. So the first introduction when I joined politics actually was not even to use the word Islam. It was the days of the euphemisms of violent extremism. So that's what we would be discussing, violent extremism, and all sorts of names and labels that didn't make sense at all and that didn't take us to the core of the problem. But I do it mainly to signal to Muslim audiences, I'm not criticizing you. It's about these basic, most pure and political forms of Islam. And so I'm happy to call it Islamism if it's practical to have the conversation. And what can I say? I think that I've made some traction with some people. Incredibly, it's the people who are in the Middle East, people from the UAE, Saudis, Iraqis, Jordanians, who actually do want to have the conversation just as you're having it. But it's the immigrant Muslims who say, no, I can't, you can't, it's, Islam is peace. Yeah.
Thank you. Sam, over here, Sam Bickerstaff, thanks.
Thank you very much. This is really the other side of the coin to that last question. You talked about the practicality of distinguishing between Islam and Islamism. I wondered, in reflecting on what the future of Islam might be in general, what you might see the place being for particularly Sufi forms of Islam. Because we talk about very often in Western discourse a certain violence that seems to be quite primordial in Islam, whether in the Quran itself or in the history of the Prophet and the history that followed. But within Sufi authors, such as Ibn Arabi or Ibn Sabain, you get an overwhelming emphasis on love. And love seems to be the absolute centerpiece of that philosophy. And so I wonder whether, as you've already distinguished between different kinds of attitudes within the Islamic world, whether in diaspora or in the Middle East, there might be a way forward that you think you would quite like to see for the religion returning to certain Sufi roots and moving away from the more hostile or more originally violent forms of Islam.
So in the past, it used to be the caliph, the central authority, who would have the discretion to either loosen the leash or, decide how pure the constituency was going to be or not, and had a relationship with the ulama, the clergymen, who may have wanted to apply Islam as in its purest form. In modern day, 21st century Muslim world, we don't have a caliph, but we do have the custodian of Mecca and Medina, of the mosques, the holy sites of Islam. And the Saudis have in the past convened and chaired and brought together the large Sunni nations, which is a majority of Muslims. And they have embarked through resolutions in these conventions on certain policy measures. I think it's perfectly possible today for Mohammed bin Salman to convene the leaders of the Muslim world. I think Trump, in his first term, got them to agree to the Abraham Accords to somehow recognize Israel and embark maybe on the possibility of having a relationship with them, trade and security, which really made the ulama, the clergymen, livid. And so it is possible for these political leaders to go around the ulama and to decide what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. The government of the UAE has overhauled its school curriculum from nursery school all the way to universities and somehow managed to keep the ulama out. Mohammed bin Salman, the future king of Saudi Arabia, he wants to diversify his economy and make it part of the global order. And he has embarked on it and has already defied the ulama. So I think, practically speaking, it is possible for them to convene together and to say there are parts of the Quran and the Hadith and the Seerah that we are going to declare obsolete. And that from now onwards, this is what's taught to children. And this is how we define Islam. That's perfectly possible.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And that would usher in the Reformation that you were arguing for in Heretic.
Yeah. But it has to be enforced.
Yes.
And so you see, but again, I just want to remark on the difference between Islam and Christianity in that sense. For Islam to be truly a religion of peace, it has to be enforced by the ruler with force. We have to define what peace is and enforce it with the hard hand. And with Christianity to be, and that was again the Reformation, for it to be truly a religion of peace, you have to go back to the basic Gospels and the doctrines. Last night I was reading to my son, just as Jesus is being crucified, and he says, he prays to God and prays for the Pharisees and says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." My Somali blood was boiling, and I was thinking, these terrible people. And there he was saying, "Forgive them." So this is, again, really, it's very important to distinguish that there is a difference between the two religions here.
Thank you very much indeed. I want to return to the theme of terminology and this phrase, Islamic extremism. Some people would say radical Islam. And I wonder if there's a danger with a phrase like that it actually hands a compliment to those who might embrace that, because it makes it sound like the most authentic Islam is actually this. And even comments tonight may have suggested that. And it seems to me that whether or not that's the case, based on the Quran, Hadith, and so on, shouldn't be the business of non-Muslims or those who are speaking politically. And it's really important for us to speak politically. So the questions are, does a particular form of a religion support terrorism? Does it support revolution? And so on. And so I guess my question is it possible for us, when we speak of Islam
in political contexts to make sure that any qualification we give is a political one and not a theological one. So we're asking politicians to stay strictly to the question of, is this a particular ideology which is claiming to be above the law of the land or not? How they get there theologically shouldn't really matter for the politician. Any response on that?
For the politician, yeah. But what about for the academic? And what about, I was embroiled in discussions. This was back when Obama was president, 2008, 2009. They had within the national security segment in Homeland Security, a group of agents who were trained, and they weren't just trained in how to prevent an attack that was being plotted. They were trained and really fluent in the Quran and in the Hadith, in the reliance of the traveler, in all the other writings of Sayyid Qutb and many of the Islamist thinkers. And that was part of understanding and analyzing the threat. And so under those, Obama abolished it using the same argument with people saying, oh, it's Islamophobic for these people who are within the government to hold theological knowledge or theological argument. But and I think it's a loss. I think it's terrible. But under those circumstances, what would you say then? Do you say less knowledge or more knowledge? I think if you're having a polite conversation with a Muslim, small talk, I would say please avoid talking about that. If we are studying the roots of the Muslim Brotherhood, an organization that's almost 100 years old, and say, who are they? What are their objectives? I think it becomes hard, difficult, impossible not to talk about that. Just if you ask me, what is woke? What are the origins of woke? Sooner or later, we will start talking about some of the basics of communism, but we'll talk about postmodernism. We'll have to, understand the ideas, the ideology, the context, the environment. So it's really, let me reassure you by doing this. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Bahrainis do not avoid the subjects. They talk about it explicitly. And so they know the Muslim Brotherhood is banned in those countries and other Islamists that are insurrectionists and that want to overthrow the system. And the only way for them to know, for those countries to know who is politically motivated and who's not, is for them to really understand the verses of the Quran that they select and the references they make to the various thinkers, and these are big thinkers of Islam. So
I guess what I've been thinking about tonight is that essentially for people who want to preserve Western society, it would be advantageous to break up the unholy alliance of the rainbow and the crescent. But I think I'm shocked that hasn't happened yet. As people have mentioned, the backsliding of women's rights in Iran and Afghanistan, you would think that would be a big wake-up call for the woke left. And so I'm wondering if you think there's something kind of deeper than just the left kind of being in search of some sort of spiritual meaning that they might be finding in this collusion with Islamism. Do you think maybe our messaging has been off? Maybe our conflation of, the different types of, extreme Islam versus, blasé, not so threatening Islam. Do you think that gives people easy license to dismiss warnings of essentially anti-woman and gender apartheid? Or do you think that there's something even deeper than that, like a mutual hatred of Christian culture, Western culture, that's shared by extreme Islamists and the woke left?
So I think it's more of the last one, where there is the revolutionary social justice warriors who have their roots in postmodernist theories and in various flavors of Marxism. And in their outlook, they're revolutionary. I think there was someone who was caught on camera who didn't know that he was caught on camera, who works in the Biden administration, and who was, it was about 90 days ago when Kamala Harris was being coronated, and who came out and said explicitly, when critical race theory, he said, is not being nice, it's tearing down the structures. You guys don't understand it. We want to tear down the structures. So if you have that revolutionary sentiment, that's the hardcore of them. I don't know if the pink-haired students, I don't know if they really want to go that far. But this is the hardcore of the ideology. And then you have the crescent, which is also, we've got to tear down these structures and replace it with Sharia law. I'll say the crescent and the rainbow are going together. They're on their way. They agree on this destruction and bringing down of structures. But then what happens after that? How are they going to treat one another? And so there we have a little bit of history. In Iran in 1979, there was a far left Iranians who wanted to bring down the Shah and wanted to tear everything down. And they worked harmoniously with the Islamists led by Ayatollah Khomeini. Now I'll become self-conscious every time I say Islamist. And Khomeini and his people, when they won and they assumed the power, they killed, they exiled, they imprisoned, and they suppressed the rainbow. That was the end of their story. We've also got, and again, it's in the Middle East, the Baathists, who are hardcore, who once every so often would decide that they were going to use the Muslim Brothers for their political ends. And then they would be welcomed and the Muslim Brothers would grow. And Syria is one example there, where when they became big enough and dangerous enough to overthrow the government, the dictator of the day, he massacred them. He killed about 20,000 or 10,000. It's a very large number were killed in one day. So this goes back and forth. And I would say, given the history that we know, we don't want any of these two revolutionary movements to develop enough to A, destroy our structures, and B, and which is really, for me, the more important matter, is for them to capture the hearts and the minds of the youth, which they have done to a great extent here.
What she said near the end there, towards the end there, I think is the most important. And I've alluded to this before. If Israel was wiped off the map tomorrow, what exactly would happen between all of these Islamist groups tomorrow? I'll wait. I'll wait. If Israel didn't exist tomorrow, what would happen between these groups? Between Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas and militia groups in Iraq and the IRG, what would happen in Egypt? Please, there has to be a reality that something happens, right? Israel doesn't just get wiped off the map and then suddenly the land is barren forever. What do they do to each other? How do they treat one another? Do they set up picnics? It will tell you everything. When you imagine a Middle East, the landscape of a Middle East with no Israel on it, it will tell you everything there is to know about what exactly Israel is preventing from happening. This, my friends, this is why Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and everyone who has voiced their loud opinion against Israel has seemed to flip the whole story. If you want to continue the conversation, you can support my work for free. Discord does not cost a thing. It is the best way to connect with me and others who are seeking the truth. The link is in the description. But if you want to take it one step further, my Patreon gives you access to the Israel you don't see, uncovering the untold stories of what mainstream media does not show you. The link is in the description and it helps me to continue this work. Or if you're just looking to help this thing go, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee is a really easy way to support me. This channel, this work does not happen without all of you. Thank you. I love you. I'll see you next time.